And you're live.
Good morning. We call the regular meeting of the Audit Committee to order on November 20th. We have a quorum present. The first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. I would like to add under old business a D, which would just be an update on where we are with the fraud and abuse complaint that we received many months ago. Does that meet the approval of the committee members? If so, I would accept a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. The ayes have it. Next is approval of the minutes from October 16th. I was not there, so I can't make a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any additions, amendments, or discussion of the amendments as submitted? I will make a note that the parenthetical insertion by Kim for the discussion that was held on July 17th vis-a-vis the fraud and abuse was very helpful. It got me immediately up to speed. So all those in favor of approving the minutes as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Now we turn to old business. And I submit to you that item A, Audit Committee vacancies is probably old business for every single board and commission. I take it from the minutes that there was some discussion because I saw that, Jim, you were going to be doing something. What did I remember seeing?
Contact Hillary with regards to open audit committee positions.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So we have two open positions. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And do you have a report on your contact with Hillary?
Other than I was not, I did not follow through on it.
Okay. All right. Well,
and I will.
All right. Is there any?
Well,
yes.
I just had a question for my own edification. The audit committee, membership on the audit committee, I'm assuming that members have to be Annapolis residents. Is that correct?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
There's no restriction. There's no restriction of residency with regards to the 4 non-council positions.
Okay.
So there are 3 members of the committee and 1 designee from the Financial Advisory Commission.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Well, since I have been absent so many times, I will take it on my shoulders to have a conversation with Hillary and see what we can do. Obviously, we do need a fully, although the positions of the audit committee filled, and under new business, we can talk about some new things that I think will certainly need to have a full committee to deal with it. Performance measures and strategic plan. Ms. Buckland, do you have an update for us on that?
Just a brief one. I had hoped to have confirmation of the strategic planning retreat, but I am still securing that confirmation of the dates. It is my understanding that they're looking at January for having that. The performance measures are moving along. I had said last time my goal was to have 4 of them redone entirely, and we'll make that. Jody and I actually were talking about hers because finance is one of them.
Okay.
So that's moving along. one of the things, obviously, for me, from a performance measure standpoint, is that I do sort of want to get to the other side of that strategic planning retreat, because there should be some measures that come out of that that we then potentially want to tie department measures to. One of the things that I tend to do that's maybe a little bit different from what you've seen in the past is that I like to be explicit about what question we're trying to answer. And so that's something that you'll see that might be a little bit different than what you've seen in the past. I personally find it helpful just to be explicit about what question we're trying to answer.
Yes.
Rather than that simply being a data point, right? What was our intended use for that information? But at any rate, things are moving along, and I'll hit that goal.
So I have a few comments, but I'll ask for comments from the committee. So I think that performance measures should be driven by the strategic plan. So I couldn't agree more that we need to have a updated strategic plan before we start driving the performance measures. I would ask you if you have looked at the current draft of the comprehensive plan, which does seem to have, for most departments, a lot of things that should at least be considered as part of performance measures. And in fact, I think should be considered as performance measures rather than part of the comp plan, but we'll wait till the council actually gets the comp plan before we have that. But a lot of work has been done that I think is fairly robust in putting together the comprehensive plan. And I've always felt that the strategic plan, the performance measures, the comprehensive plan, and for me, and I'm saying this for Ms. Dickinson's ears, the spending affordability model ought to be the three-legged stool that we rest our overall guidance on for the city. Follow the strategic plan, follow the comprehensive plan, and then guide the budget by what we can afford to spend. That's a discussion for a different committee and a different day. But in any event, thank you for the update. And Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it is a discussion for another date, but I'm not a fan, and I've made it quite clear of the comprehensive plan. And yes, performance measures should be a part of it, but Ward 3 is woefully left out. So I'll say those 2 cents for now. Thank you.
Well, I read your 34 pages, but I'm happy to relay to you last Thursday that many of the members of the Planning Commission also read your 34 pages, and in their meeting, they acknowledged the receipt, but also there's a major new revision to the comprehensive plan that was submitted by Mr. Lashinsky to the Planning Commission. And I think it's very much like you, I believe, very much a work in progress. But in any event, I would like to let you know that you have been heard. Whether you will get a response to having been heard that is pleasing is a next step, but we can deal with that when it comes to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I see I wanted to add risk assessment and fraud and abuse as D, but it was already on as C. So excuse me, let's go on to that item in the agenda if there's no further discussion of the performance measures in the strategic plan. All right, so the last I remember, which was probably back in July, we had received a report from the finance department that they had evaluated the situation and that it was acknowledged that there were some shortcomings in the reporting by the operators of the market house, but that they were being addressed and updated. Is there anything new to talk about updating the procedures in terms of receiving the required reports and receiving the payments? I guess I turn to you, Ms. Dickinson.
So specifically, I have gotten some more reports. I got a package from them recently. I think it was about 2 weeks ago or so. I dropped off a package here, but I have not gone through it. It has some of the reports. What I have yet to do is go back through and see if they paid everything up to date.
Okay.
Because during COVID, there were a couple of lapses in payments for our special arrangement that we laid out, and they're still paying on that, but they are consistently giving us the funds monthly now.
So I'd like to discuss with the committee. I will just put forth my assessment of where we are and see if it's amenable to where the rest of you think we are. In my offline discussions with city officials, I don't have the sense that there is fraud, which to me is a specific intent to avoid or misreport or do something like that. Is that the sense of the rest of the committee, that there's not fraud, an actual attempt to mislead or abuse or short change the city? Ms. Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would, before answering that question, I would like a definition from our Office of Law regarding the word fraud.
Okay. Would you also like a definition of the word abuse?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's fair. And it is clearly a responsibility of this committee to look at it. I refer you to the responsibilities of the committee, which is charter is chapter title 248-422E. The audit committee shall oversee the establishment and execution of permission procedures for receipt, retention, retreatment, and resolutions of allegation of improper procedures, irregularities. Those two might actually obtain to this case: fraud, waste, or abuse. And so it is clearly under our domain, and it is clearly the next section, which goes on F, says that the city, particularly the finance department, will help us sort these things out. I believe we are following our charge under the code, and I believe that the finance department and the city manager's office have been helping us with this. It has been a slow process. Probably my absences from these committee meetings has helped prolong it a little bit, but as we just heard from the finance director, we've received within the last 2 weeks additional information, so it is an ongoing process. Is there anything else the committee would like to do with this particular topic on the agenda? Yes, Mr. Cardillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned within the charging docs of the audit committee is to assess improper procedures. And I guess with all the discussions with regards to this specific lease, and let's talk generics and specifics, with regards to specifics, the procedure here was a periodic report from the tenant to the landlord, being the city, which is kind of broad. And so specifically with regards to this, what is the process? What is the procedure? So I can't assess whether the procedures are improper or not if I don't know what the process is.
Well, I will happily defer to the finance director. I do think there is an answer to that, but
thank you.
So the agreement stipulates that they are to perform a compilation, and that's an annual gathering of their financial statements. And in my history, compilation is something that's done by an audit firm. They put together the financial statements, And then they write a report saying they aren't responsible for the content, but they have pulled them together from the records. And they have not yet done a compilation. I don't know where that process is. What I did get from them is some tax documents, but I haven't tried to compare those to the data they gave me, because the way you report things there may not be the same that they would be using the revenue to calculate what they owe us. But as of now, through June 30, I believe they're caught up with all of the, what do they call it? That annual payment that they have to make based on sales. They've caught up. And it came in pieces because they have some tenants there that they have to relay the rent from to the calculation. So that all came in pieces, but we're caught up now. There's just there's a balance that's back due from the COVID, when they had a special payment plan that was broken out over 2 years, and they're a couple months behind in that. So, but they're continuing to make that payment every month now.
So if I understand, the process is the tenant provides financial information to the city in the form of the finance department on a periodic basis, annually or quarterly, and accompanying that annually, and accompanying that is a payment for additional rent. So there was a base rent piece, and then there's additional rent based on a gross receipts calculation. So that's the process that was in place.
Right.
And the tenant failed to execute under the contract by not delivering.
Correct.
So then it gets back to, what is the process that the city has for the monitoring and maintenance of this agreement?
Yeah. And I can say to that we don't have somebody who monitors all those receivables, and we can try our best, and we have their monthly bills being billed out in invoices, but not the annual piece. And as I am getting ready to list the accounts receivable, the senior accountant for accounts receivable position, and that's going out very soon. I don't know where we're going to sit this person when we hire him, but we'll have to tackle that problem as we go through the process. We need somebody in that role, because this is not the only, what do I say? I call them random agreements that we have that aren't in line with the rest of the city's business. And we've set up a lot of these types of arrangements over the years, and there's groups of them. And we have billing clerks doing the billing, but there's no one person to monitor those agreements and make sure they're complying with all the terms of the agreements.
Thank you. So then, thank you, Jody. And then, so, Mr. Chair, then we talked about the specifics with regards to this contract, but then in a general sense, that the audit committee should be considering what is the process for these other agreements for the monitoring and maintenance of these contracts. And I'm gonna guess that this starts with the Office of Law, who is ultimately negotiating these contracts, but then they are charging specific departments with the monitoring and maintenance. And that's where I think the audit committee needs to understand, what are the procedures for the monitoring and maintenance of these agreements on a broader scale.
I think you're correct there, but also, as I understand it, there's a difference in the accounting period between the city's accounting and the accounting period that was being used by the leasers of the market house. And so I think that was one of the things that had to get aligned properly in the reporting, but I'll turn to the finance director for confirmation.
I don't think it's specifically with regards to finance department's duties and responsibilities. It's just within, when you have a contract with the city, the Office of Law, I assume, is managing that, but then the monitoring and maintenance goes out to various departments. And I just want to be able to say that the procedures for this are in place. They are enforced, and in this case, due to staffing considerations, the procedure was not followed. But broadly, it would help the audit committee to be able to say, yes, there are procedures in place for the monitoring and maintenance of city agreements.
Yeah, and actually you bring up an interesting point. What is the final output from the audit committee? Is it a, a report of recognizing the complaint, I guess we call it, and categorizing the responses from the city and presumably having something in there on how we will address the procedures to make sure that this doesn't happen again? I think the finance director correctly characterized this as we have a lot of different random kinds of relationships with people, including I was just out at the energy park a few weeks ago looking at the pollinator garden, and that's a whole nother kind of contractual relationship that is not routine sort of business. And I suspect that we pay more attention to that because we're getting the power reports and those sorts of things. But nevertheless, there's a whole bunch of irregular kinds of relationships we have, which quite frankly, I think is a good thing. I don't think we should be straitjacketed into something, but yeah, so there's something to look at in a broader sense of procedures. I will liken this to my favorite pet peeve, which is rules and regulations, which we we recognized in code that the departments all have the power to promulgate rules and regulations, with the proviso that those rules and regulations would be made publicly available through the city's website. And I know recently we have promulgated many rules and regulations, some of which you can find on the city's website, but I would wager that 99% of the city's rules and regulations, and maybe that's an overestimate, cannot be found on the city's website, including, for example, pages and pages of procedures for the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board, procedures that are followed within planning and zoning. It's always been my sense that once we get performance measures, that one of the things that we can drill down into is how all of the departments and offices manage the development and promulgation of their rules and procedures, but that's a topic for a different committee. Thank you for your question, and I think it helps clarify where we are.
Yeah, early on there, you had asked, what is the role of the audit committee in this? And I think that since these deliberations are public record, I think the deliberations are important, and ultimately, within either the prescribed minutes or within this discussion, that some sort of determination that we've deemed that there are procedures in place, the procedures are appropriate. They were not followed in this case due to this, and it is corrective action has been implemented. So, yeah, addressing it as an isolated incident. If you're comfortable that there is a sound procedure in place for the monitoring and maintenance of city agreements.
Oh, you had me right up until city agreements.
I'm just saying
that I feel comfortable that we have gotten up to speed on
this specific
and measuring the market house.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, but there may be other agreements that the city enters into.
Yes.
And that there are not procedures in place for the monitoring and maintenance of agreements.
Right. And that's a broader issue, but
yeah, I mean, it gets to what the audit committee charging documents talk about, improper procedures.
Yep, I agree.
Thank you.
And but I would ask you in response to your statement, do you feel we are at a point, and I don't think we are given Alderman Pendle Charles' request for definition of fraud and abuse, do you think we're at a point yet where this committee can issue a report on this particular complaint?
I think we're still in the information gathering phase.
I agree.
I think we're still gathering information. We are trying to, number one, understand the procedure. Number two, understand why the procedure wasn't followed. And number three, understanding what the corrective action is to prevent this from going forward. So if you break it out to those three parts, I think it's premature.
Yep.
Thank you.
I will just ask the rest of the committee. That is certainly my sense of where we are. Anne Marie or Rhonda, what's your sense?
I totally agree. Thank you, Jim.
I agree as well. Don't have
Okay.
enough information yet.
All right, so this meeting is being taped and is publicly available. Anybody with an interest in this issue can see where we consider ourselves to be. It's ongoing, and when we're ready, we will issue a report. But Mr. Cardillo raises a larger issue, which I think he is correct, is also the charge of this committee, which is to look at the rules, the procedures, and what is it? Execution of procedures for receipt, retention, and treatment of various processes in the city. I think the director of finance has indicated that they have now added some rigor to this particular instance, but we're waiting to hire a staff person to get more rigorous across the board. Is that a correct characterization, Ms. Dickinson?
Yes, and what's happening is the dealings now with the marketplace is just on my desk, and as he and I, the manager there, talk back and forth as he gives me things, and that's just one of those many things that I have to try to keep up with.
Yeah,
I have time, so so it's here. He's giving me things. I talked to him on the phone. I think they're, except for those couple of delays, if you remember, their standard rent payment was reconfigured over COVID. And then there was a catch-up agreement done. And that's what we still are a couple months behind on. But like I said, right now they are giving us those monthly payments, and it'll come in probably terminate a couple months later than originally anticipated. But we're catching up, and they're trying to do what they're supposed to do on the reporting side. But that's just something I have to try to keep my finger on.
Okay.
The other agreements, I call them random. They're not, I don't know if that's the right word. They're all related to city property, things we're doing with city property, leases, a lot of special pilot agreements with certain properties over the years. And they have all different types of reporting requirements, and their remittance amount sometimes varies based on activity. And we really don't have anybody in place to kind of monitor that, to make sure that we're getting what we should be getting at the right amount, and have a review process on that to make sure we're getting the right amounts at the right time.
Okay. Any last comments from the committee before we move to new business? All right. I will just gratuitously say, while I'm no longer on the finance committee, I still remember all of the various things that come across the finance director's desk, and it's legion. And I fully understand how hard it is to keep up with this, particularly with not having all of the staff in place. We seem to get one staff and then lose one staff, and get another and then lose one. So, I mean, I think that's a fact of life for all the departments, but I have particular empathy for the finance department on this regard. All right, new business, audit of the Arts in Public Places Commission. I was not here when this got put on the agenda, but I'd be interested in knowing the genesis of this and what the thoughts of the committee are. Oh, okay, Alderwoman.
Just curious as to who and why this was placed on the agenda. Are we on a track of auditing not only our departments, but also our boards and commissions? Just curious.
I believe that it originated with a question from Alderwoman Tierney. I guess it started as a constituent question, and then she and Alderwoman O'Neill had raised a question about the Art and Public Places Commission and what oversight there was with regards to that. So that's where I believe it originated. Other than that, I don't want to speak for anyone.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cardillo.
So we, for the longest time, Arts and Public Places was financed by a tap on the city budget that was like 0.0005% of the operating budget. But then there was a couple years ago a run to the legislature and they put a tap on our hotel tax. So now there's at least two sources of income. It is, and I'll turn to the finance director to make sure I'm saying it is essentially a revolving fund in that monies carry over from one year to the next. There's a considerable amount of money there now. And I do think it's a good idea to understand how that's all monitored and who has responsibility to look at how funds are expended.
I can give you some background on this, and as far as the revenue sources are concerned, once they got the tap on the hotel motel / occupancy taxes, they get 3% of all of our collections. Once they did that, we terminated the general fund piece because the 3% was much higher than what they were getting from the general fund piece. So we are still giving them that money. It's a little different for them because the money, we post the revenues into the accounts on a quarterly basis. And they used to have all of their money available to spend right on July 1. And they're being very conservative and not committing their funds to their purposes without knowing what was collected from the occupancy tax. So even though the budget is there for them to spend, they're waiting for the revenue to be posted before they make commitments on it. It is a variable amount, and so they can't be certain. And what's happened is we collect them monthly, and at the end of every quarter, we have a period whereby we reconcile the reports, and we don't disperse the money to AIPPC or the other 3 recipients who have a piece of our occupancy taxes. We don't let that money go until there's a delay after the quarter. After a month, they have a month to file the reports, and then we start a reconciliation process. So there's like a 7 or 8 week delay in how quickly they get those quarterly monies. And they have started a new grant program there, and they were running low on what grant funds they could commit. And a lot of the potential grant recipients were being told that there wasn't enough there to allocate to new grants. And I think that stirred up a lot of public sentiment about how quickly the city was posting the funds there and what was being spent, et cetera, et cetera. In the meantime, I went on their board meeting in October, and I talked to the board about the delay and how that works here in-house. And explained to them about the timing of it and why it's delayed. And they have talked about setting up their grant program, so they're doing it in stages instead of trying to do it all at the beginning of the year. So they have the money throughout the year, and they know when people are applying that they're applying based on a certain timing of the hotel taxes. So we're getting on top of that. And as far as what Alderwoman Tierney wanted she wanted an audit of what they're spending their money on. I'm not sure where that came from specifically. I just know with a lot of the complaints that came in, there was questions about what AIPPC is spending the money on. So I can tell you what they spend it on because we make the payments for them at their direction. So it's just, I don't know what the purpose was, what the objective was of her recommendation or question.
So we do not have Alderwoman Tierney with us today, but I want to throw out a notion to the committee. Perhaps it would be a good idea just to invite them to come to one of our audit committee meetings and give us a general purview of what they're doing. It seems to me that with new monies, Art in Public Places, which started off as providing murals and artwork like at the circle there, Westmoreland Circle, to now also expanding into concerts on City Dock and those sorts of things. I see your hand up, Jim, and I'll get to you in a second. So I think it would be, before we trod too much further down this path, maybe we ought to just have a representative from Arts and Public Places invited to come to our next meeting and have a chat. Maybe everything is fine here. And we just needed to come to a better understanding of what's going on. But Mr. Cardillo. Oh, you're on mute.
Could I suggest an alternative instead of having the AI PPC person sit through this meeting? Maybe they could simply write up a procedures doc, which would tell us how they go about doing their work. And then we, as the committee, could, review it, determine it's appropriate, and it becomes memorialized. And that may address some concerns from constituents or others as to what how the activity of Art in Public Places works, and if they have a document that can be memorialized.
Right. How does that sit with the committee? So, Alderwoman.
Yes, we can certainly do that. And if that's not acceptable or we have questions, then we can certainly invite them in.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. If we don't like the doc, yeah, we could say, hey, I think you might want to provide. Thank you. Thank you. That's perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. So I don't know whether we have to vote on this, that the committee issue a request through whom I do not know to the Arts and Public Places Committee to send to us their rules and procedures, which I think might be documented on the city website, but
is there a staff liaison for Art in Public Places?
I would imagine it's Hillary.
So go ahead, Jody. Sorry.
Yeah, Hillary would be one source of contact, and Brian Callahan is also works with the organization. So he's very knowledgeable about what they're doing. They are spending their funds pretty regularly now, which is why they're having to kind of hold back on making grants to these organizations that are asking for funding.
Well, how about if I volunteer to give Hillary and Brian a call and ask them what kinds of information are available, and if they could either get it to us or help us to find the place where we get it, and we can put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments on this particular item? All right, we have now time for reports from subcommittees and members and from the finance director. So Ms. Dickinson, can you give us an update, please?
Sure. So this time of year, we typically are getting ready to sell bonds for capital projects, but we are not doing it this year. We still have proceeds left from our previous bond sale. So I haven't had to tackle that this year. We are getting ready to begin union negotiations and meet with the various units. And so I'm having to prepare some financial information for those groups. We are working on getting the annual comprehensive financial report out. And Julie and I have been working with the expectation to have it done by December 31st, but I think we've decided that we're pushing that too hard, and we're not going to make the December 31st again this year, but it should be in pretty good shape because we're getting there much more quickly than we were last year, but we're still a little bit behind on that deadline. We've talked to the auditors about that, and they agree, because although we can finish it up in the time frame, I think that their work won't be able to be finished in time with our delays that we're having. And as you know, we're starting the budget cycle, working on the budget planning documentation and schedules. That's going to have a lot of different pieces this year with the union negotiations going on, and our comprehensive comp study, or compensation study that HR is conducting. That's not going to be done until January, February timeframe. And so how that feeds into the budget is also going to be something we'll have to work with at the last, while we're preparing those budget documents. I wanted to say a little bit about staffing. one of the issues here is that we are, when we tried to fill our accounting manager position before, we couldn't find a candidate from the outside at that level. So we filled it at a senior accountant position from internally and then backfilled everything. And now the senior accountant that took that role is leaving on December 1st. So we're back to, we're gonna re-advertise that as an accounting manager and see if we can get that higher level supervisory person that we need in that role to free Julie up to do more managerial type tasks. Because right now she's in the details and preparing reports and pulling reconciliations together, and that should not be her role. We have a cashier that's moving across the street to fill our buyer position because our long-term buyer, Valessa, is retiring, and Brianna is moving over there to take her place. So we've got a vacancy at the cashier level as well. And the senior buyer, we've had that advertised a couple times. We're going to try to fill that with a temp for now with some specialized buyer experience. That's a little more expensive, but it's been vacant way too long. So we need to get somebody in there with the adequate experience. So that's the story of my vacancies.
Okay.
Everything else is, you think you're almost there and then, something happens. So it is it's a grueling job.
So if I might ask, occasionally in years past, there has been a meeting with the city council prior to the beginning of the budget formation to talk about different budget priorities. Is there a plan, and this may be for the city manager, for there to be a meeting with the city council to discuss budget priorities in general? And I will put in a particular issue that I've become more and more exposed to lately, which is we mentioned Art and Public Places doing grants. We have our community grant part of the budget, which has decreased tremendously from when Alderwoman Finlayson and I first came on the council. It's less than half of what it was. On the other hand, we have the Annapolis United monies with Parks and Recs. We have the Adopt the Community money. And I was just at the Annapolis Anne Arundel Community Action Agency, and they have a whole slew of grants, many of which come to the city. And it does feel, and this may fall under our rubric of looking at procedures, we have all kinds of grant huddles and maybe not grant coordination, but it's my personal feeling that addressing public safety is done with public safety people, but also with social services. And the social service money is coming from all of these different grants. And if we're going to be efficient and effective with making the grants help us, it just seems like there ought to be some look at coordinating all of these efforts. And I think dramatically increasing the amount of money that goes into community grants. As I mentioned, when Sheila and I started, my recollection is that community grants were $800,000 and the city budget was around $56 million. Now the budget is $185 million and the grants are 352 community grants, but then there are other grants. But nevertheless, it's always been the position that the county and higher entities are largely responsible for these social systems. We have now created the Office of Social Services. I like to call it the Office of Community Caring, but in any event, that needs more staff. And it does seem to me that if we're going to stop the gunfire, we really need to be doing a lot of different approaches. So that was me getting in some personal druthers, but the big question is there any plan for a meeting with the council prior to the commencement of the budget process to have a chat about budget priorities and potentially changing budget priorities?
I'll take a stab at actually both of those things. So just a quick reminder that council passed R 48 23 earlier this year, which was to put together a task force to look at the grants programs and to make some recommendations. So that, like, council's already done that, expressed that desire through that particular piece of legislation. As far as the priorities are concerned, my working assumption maybe is the right term, but maybe not the right thing to do. That part of what the point of that strategic planning retreat was to gather some information like that, both in the larger sense, but then using that as a lens for budget development, because those things should align, right? Those things should go together. So in terms of asking about priorities, I think that those efforts go together.
So I will respond, and I will ask the committee's indulgence or reprimand, whichever you feel. But it's always been said that the council controls the purse strings. However, the reality is the finance director controls the purse strings. And by the time the budget gets to the council, we argue over the CIP program and the community grants, because the rest of the budget is locked in. And in fact, that's probably the way it should be. But I'm not sure that's what the code says it should be or intended. And I do think that this is a very big item that maybe requires more than just tucking it into being part of the strategic plan retreat. That's a good place to bring it up, but I find it hard to believe that we're really going to be able to get into the details, such as my sense of more staff for the finance department, of course, but also for the Office of Social Services, and more money for community grants. And those are pretty budget specific items that I don't really feel are strategic plan. They should flow from strategic plan, but I think they're separate and really ought to have a meeting with the council to discuss. But I guess I can corral my colleagues and see what they think about it. But the budget is being made right now. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the budget for 24 isn't already within 1 or 2 percentage points already locked in place. And that's basically, we do what we've been doing, and we escalate it for the cost of doing business and anything we negotiate in salaries and expenses. And that's pretty much it. And that does not leave a lot of room for changing priorities. And it seems to me that we always hear when we get to the budget to the council, well, it's too late to change those kinds of priorities. We have to get this passed, and we have to get the tax rate to the state by the middle of June. And so maybe you should start earlier doing these things. But I think that it is important to have a meeting with the council, and I guess I'll poll the council members and see if they find it's important. Anyway, we got out of audit committee mode there for a second. Sorry, apologize. Is there any other items that we need to cover on this agenda? If not, is it time to have a motion to adjourn? And by the way, good morning, Mr. City Attorney. Thank you for joining us. We're about to leave. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.